From the studios of Cheshire TV in Keene, New Hampshire, it's time for The Padded Room, a show where we dispel myths, explore trends, and delve into mental illness and mental health, both yours and ours, with your hosts, Stigma Busters Damien Licata and Forrest Seymour.
Everyone, and welcome to The Padded Room. I'm Damien Licata, and this is Forrest Seymour, and we are here to talk about issues related to mental health and mental illness. The intro says yours and ours. Ours we sort of leave to your assessment, I think.
Right. You can send that in via our website.
That's
and let
right.
us know what you think.
Yep. So we have a great guest today. We're going to be talking about a really interesting topic about foster care and some of the related mental health issues, among other things.
It's very exciting.
And but I understand that you had something you wanted to touch on.
I've been reading this. Yes, I've been reading this really interesting book, and it and some of the mental health implications that it touches on came to mind, and I wanted to just share it with our viewer. Single viewer out there.
Paying attention out there?
There you go. Yeah. So this is called Under the Banner of Heaven. It's by John Krakauer. He's very popular, written a bunch of books. But and this was given to me recently, and I have been enjoying it. It's about the Mormons. It's actually about a murder that was committed by some fundamentalist Mormons in the 80s. But it goes into all this detail about the Mormon religion, and it gets into sort of the Messiah thing and how, particularly in many religions, but the Mormon religion, there's a lot of
LDS, I think we call them.
Well, but this is the fundamentalists.
Oh, okay.
LDS. But I think in the LDS too. But in any case, there's a lot of like speaking to God and getting prophecies and interesting things like that. And there's a discussion in the book about, so is this spiritual is this God's voice, or is this
psychosis?
Right, or hallucinations or something like that. There's also been a series on national public radio lately where they've been looking into like the God spot in the brain and talking about brain scans and inducing sort of experiences with gods using drugs or other magnets and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just an interesting topic. I mean, we're not going to talk in depth about it today, but it's fascinating.
It is a fascinating topic.
Maybe we can find somebody.
I heard a quote actually from somebody. I think I think it may have been on NPR the other day, where they were saying that to say that you said they've been able to induce artificially
this experience of the presence of God,
these spiritual experiences, and a minister had said that to say that because they can do this, that proves that there is no God, is like saying that because they can physically stimulate that part of the brain that causes you to smell roses, that doesn't mean that roses don't exist.
Yes, well, there you go.
Reality.
Or like as our pagan technical director said, is it God or is it mental health? His answer is yes.
His answer is yes. Right. So anyway, it's a fascinating topic.
It is.
And I think it'd be great to have a guest on to talk about that.
Yeah, maybe somebody knows someone who would be really appropriate to talk about that. That'd be cool. But let's get on to our guest.
Absolutely, please. Let's do that. Today, as I said, we're going to be talking about foster care. We are really happy to have someone here who both works in the field and is himself a foster parent. This is Heath Hooper. Welcome to the show, Heath.
Thank you.
We're delighted to have you. Heath works in human resources at Easter Seals, and he is a foster parent as well, as I said, through DCYF. He has been a foster parent for 6 years, right? Heath's lived in the area in New Hampshire for about 15 years. He's originally from the seacoast of Maine.
Of Maine, yes.
And so we are delighted to have you, and we have a lot of questions. And
thank you.
Thanks for joining us here in the padded room.
Appreciate you being here.
So you work at Easter Seals, and we actually have the Easter Seals logo up. I don't know if our audience can see it all the time, but it should be something.
We'll just sort of lean.
Yeah, we'll lean this way.
Yeah. And so tell us a little bit about Easter Seals, because I know Easter Seals does a lot of different stuff. I mean, I'm aware they work with veterans, they do blah, 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 they do lots of really great work, but we're talking particularly about the foster care part today, so tell us about that.
Easter Seals Foster Care, we are really all over the state of New Hampshire. Our foster care deals with older children that may have some serious behavioral issues, emotional issues, or even some disabilities physically. And they're typically children that are 8 years or older, more so the older age, but that's where pretty much our care starts, is 8 years old.
So and this is different than if you were looking into a foster care program like DCYF or something, which is a different age range, different
Yep.
kind of kids.
DCYF, the State of New Hampshire Division of Child, Youth, and Families, is typically 0 to 18 years old. And you could potentially be a foster parent for a child right out of the maternity ward at the hospital, right up to their age 18.
Yeah.
And then, potentially thereafter,
Yeah.
you could be a lifelong foster parent for that child.
But with Easter Seals, it's more, what I want to say, kids with some more challenges associated? or,
Yeah,
you
some
know?
kids with more challenges, more behaviorally, as a result of maybe some neglect or abuse in their past, maybe some mental health issues, emotional, and then we also have physical disabilities, whether they could be wheelchair bound, they could have maybe slight mental retardation all the way up to severe mental retardation. So a little bit more, I don't want to call them tougher kids, but they need the more love and the more attention to be a foster parent.
So how do these children come into the foster care system?
Usually there's an assessment done by an assessment worker who goes into the home and assesses the safety for the child. And then from there, it's determined whether the child, and through the court system, whether the child needs to be placed in an out-of-home placement. And then an automatic case plan is set up for that child, and typically that case plan is followed until a permanency is determined for that child.
Permanency?
Permanency, whether the child's going to be reunified with their parents, whether the foster parent will potentially adopt the child, or the child may go into a residential facility, or another relative may come forward and want to adopt that child as well. So there's multiple levels of permanency that child could go to.
So for a foster, or for somebody who's thinking about being a foster parent, but for the foster parent, their role could be pretty short-term, could be long, sort of open-ended in some ways.
It could be open-ended. You could be a foster parent just to provide respite for other foster parents. Those, they need a weekend away, or they have to go on vacation, and because of the case, and each case is different, the child may not be able to leave the state or even leave the country. So we have respite foster parents out there who will take the children into their homes and take them for a short amount of time. Or you could be a long-term foster parent. I have some really good colleagues that have been in the foster parents for about 20 years to 25 years and have had several children through their home, through the foster care system.
Yeah. Now, it may not be clear. I know that I said in your introduction that you're a foster parent through
Yes.
DCYF.
Yes.
You work for Easter Seals, has a foster
Yes.
care program. What is the difference between a child who comes through Easter Seals or the DCYF?
I really think it has to do with the case plan and the level of care. Our foster parents are, trained a little bit more in, when we talked about earlier, those emotional and behavioral issues and those disability issues. So they're highly trained folks. Not to say that a DCYF foster parent is. You initially go through about 24 hours of training to be a foster parent. But there's a little bit more extensive training when you become an Easter Seals foster parent. And I really think it has to do with, we get referrals from DCYF for children that our foster parents may be specialized in. So there may be a foster parent that's specialized in the behavior, maybe sexual behaviors, or behaviors of aggressive behaviors. So we may have foster parents at Easter Seals out there who, again, have gone through some significant amount of training and who are prepared for that in their home.
Wow.
So I think that's great, because we're not just talking about people who are simply, sure, I'll take in a foster child,
Right.
why not?
Yeah.
There really is some screening involved, a lot of training involved.
Absolutely. The screening basically starts off with an initial inquiry to either Easter Seals, DCYF, or there's multiple other actually foster care agencies out there. Obviously, an application process, criminal background checks, references from 5 people throughout the community, home inspections of your home. I almost said invasions, home visits of your home.
Feels like an invasion probably sometimes.
Yeah, and you actually have to write an autobiography on yourself.
Oh, wow.
And you have to go back right from earliest childhoods that you can recollect, and you really have to open yourself up.
What a process.
It is a process, and it takes a good, for me it took about 6 months. And of course with the training that's required now for all agencies, and pretty much all foster parents are licensed through the state. You become a licensed home, so it's a state requirement, and we also have agency requirements too, that go, probably above and beyond what the state does.
So it's, I mean, I'm reluctant to use this word, but is it sort of like a job? Is it?
In a way, it is, but when I came into foster care, I took it as I have an opportunity to help a child. And some people look at it as, you get that, and foster parents get I call it a stipend or a little bit of payment, but that's to help with the expenses for the child. For me, that doesn't matter because I'm going to bring them in, I'm going to treat them as their own, as my own, I should say, whether they're in my home for 2 weeks or for a lifetime. They're my son, they're my daughter. And we hope that foster parents think that it's you're making a change in a child's life. You're making a safe place. Whether there's foster parents out there who treat it as a job, I'm not going to say that they don't, because some of them they do. And they don't provide any less care than anyone like myself would. But it's like being if you have biological children of your own, it's a 24/7 job. So
Wow, what a great thing.
Yeah, it's a terrific program. Obviously, there's a huge need for this.
Huge need. Yes.
The question that I'm curious about is when you talked about, for example, you have to do this autobiography and so forth in great detail, going back into your childhood and so forth. I'm wondering, first of all, who reviews those and what they're looking for, and what sort of things would actually disqualify a person. Specifically, I'm thinking, given this program is about mental illness, and mental health. But I'm wondering if any history of mental illness or having used, mental health services in the past would disqualify a person.
Well, I think to a certain extent, the answer is probably yes. They do, I should say the licensing assessments workers do review those autobiographies, and they're going to look to find what the best match is. They actually match the children with the families. And there may be history in the foster parent's past that a particular behavior of a child may bring up some past history or maybe some past memories, which may not be a good match. Obviously, things like maybe some certain types of felonies, sexual felonies, things like that. Then they would really take a strong look at that, and any kind of a criminal history they're going to look at. Now, all foster parents are required to be fingerprinted, so obviously going to go through the FBI. So I think most of those things in the past, but absolutely they're going to take a look at your entire past and to make sure that you're providing a safe place for these children, and heaven forbid we don't do the correct screening, and we place a child in with someone that
above all the safety of the children.
Above all the safety of the children, exactly.
But it sounds like you're saying, at least around the mental health, any history of mental health services or illness or medications or something on the part of a potential foster parent, it is more about, not about precluding them from being foster parents, but about matching them appropriately.
About matching them appropriately. And, again, I guess it would depend on the severity of the mental illness. I can't speak for the licensing workers because, I don't know their entire process from A to Z. But
hey, you work in human resources. You hire and fire them, right?
Yeah. It's funny we leave the licensing workers up to do that because it's such an intense screening process. It's not like, bringing on an applicant for, I guess quote a regular job, for lack of better words. You're 24/7 care for these children. You're protecting. You're bringing a safe environment for them.
So these children, obviously, many of them will probably have emotional issues, some mental health issues. What kind of supports are available both for the children and the parents around these kinds of concerns?
Yeah, I'll start with the children first. There's obviously mental health services across the state that's provided for them. I'm not sure what the services out here in Keene, but I know Easter Seals and DCYF contracts with several mental health agencies, and obviously caseworkers, clinicians. They're surrounded by a whole team of people to help them through their behavioral issues or their emotional or mental health issues. For foster parents, there's one another. There's support groups out there. There's probably about 12 to 15 support groups across the state. Obviously, they're licensing workers and they're caseworkers. We all surround this child, so we all need to be prepared to provide, again, I always use the word safety because that's what it's all about, and permanency for that child because they need to have a set place and they need to be, in a good place. And yes, when the children come in, they obviously have experienced some type of trauma in their lives, whether just being removed from their parents, no matter how horrible or bad it was, they love those parents unconditionally, and being removed from something that's familiar to you is traumatizing in itself. So we're, always, no matter, the child could be the best child in the world, but there's some underlying mental health issues from that trauma there.
Sure.
So there's specialized training for foster parents to go through grief and loss training, how trauma affects the children. So that's what the intense training is all about.
So a foster parent with Easter Seals is going to, as you're implying, going to have to sort of go into the experience with the expectation that these kids are going to have at least some trauma, grief, loss kinds of stuff going on. They're going to have to be sensitive.
I'm here to say that all these children, no matter if they're from DCYF or Easter Seals, their lives are changing in an instant, and they could be removed, from one foster home for whatever reason to another foster home. So we're just layering on the mental health issues there, and the trauma and the grief for those children.
And I just want to say that during the show, we're going to be running the name of the contact at Easter Seals, Sandra Mativia, and her phone number, so that if people are curious, want more information, they can call her and
absolutely. And they're more than welcome to go on our website at Easter Seals, eastersealsnh.org, and we have all that information. In fact, we have a little bit of information about foster care on there as well.
And it is Foster Care Month. At least it is now. I think when the show runs, it's actually going to be running in the next month.
May is Foster Care Month, and we have several celebrations throughout the state that we celebrate foster care. And there's approximately, I may get this number a little off, but between 850 and 900 foster homes in the state of New Hampshire, and about 1,200 children in foster care right now.
So that's 1,200 children, and I'm guessing that they probably, at least many of them probably feel like what they're going through is somewhat unique. I can imagine they can feel pretty overwhelmed by the experience. You'd mentioned that there's support groups for the foster parents.
Yes.
Are there any occasions to bring children together who share this experience?
Absolutely.
So that they realize that they're not alone and that other kids are...
Absolutely. I think that the toughest age group is the adolescents and teens, because they still have that huge connection to home. And there are teen groups out there. There's adolescent groups, and like I said, the caseworkers are going to have that information, and they're going to try to get those kids into those groups, because then they can relate to each other. They can network with each other, and they can create those relationships with other kids who are in a similar format. But we have a great teen group in the state who actually is, going in and trying to change legislation for teens and when kids age out of foster care. So they've been doing a fantastic job with that.
Yeah, I would think. I mean, teenagers in our society are sort of saddled with an awful lot of baggage to begin with, and then to add on the whole foster care experience.
Absolutely.
So you're touching, or sounds like they're working. The teens are working on this interesting issue, which is the aging out of foster care. I mean, the services pretty much end at 18, right? Or at least the actual foster care part.
Yeah, some services go to the age of 19, and again, it depends on the case too, and the courts and what the courts order. But typically, yes, at the age of 18, all services pretty much stop.
And at an age or an era in our society where a lot of young adults are staying at home until they're 20, 25, 30, 35, you know, I mean, there's a whole added complication for these young folks who have been in the foster care system so clearly have had some, you know, probably don't have the family supports there that we would hope for, and then they hit 18 or 19, they lose those services, and they're close to on their own. I know there are programs for bridging that transition.
Correct. Yeah. There's quite a few independent living programs out there, and there's one that we call New Hampshire Trails, and we actually train other foster parents to train teens to independently live on their own, how to write out a check and how to cook a boil an egg, I should say, or just those independent living skills that they need once they get out. And we have some great foster parents who will house the children until they get on their feet past that age of 18, and some create those lifelong connections, and they're living, going to college and coming back and forth to the foster home. So yeah.
So
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say the college thing makes me wonder, are there any programs to help kids who've been through the foster program with
There
college?
are. They're fairly new, and we're trying as a state foster parent board to push more and more for funding and for colleges to give them a little bit of a break so that they can get that education and get out there and independently live on their own. But it's still new, and we're still making strides with those programs.
I'd like to talk a little bit about you personally and how you got involved in foster care and so forth. I'm curious which came first, the job at Easter Seals working in foster care or your foster parenthood?
It's actually foster parenthood came first. Like I said, about 6 years ago, about 2003, we decided, due to not being able to have a child of our own, my wife and I decided that we were going to adopt. And that was the first thing, adoption. And then because we were new parents, our licensing worker suggested that we become foster parents so that we can, I guess, learn how to parent children, which was great. And
so this is before adoption?
This is before adoption. And shortly thereafter, the July of '04 was our first placement of an 8-year-old girl, and that was a good experience for me. Right from you think you're going to have an infant or a baby to take care of, you're taking care of an 8-year-old girl who's has a huge connection with home and loves her mother, and which is great. But trying to take care of her and make her understand why. And so that was a really good start for us. And then my son came to us shortly thereafter at 18 months old. And a little background history, he came to us from a severely neglected home, had some physical abuse, burns on his hands, some skull fractures, and so he was with us for 18 months before we adopted him in '06. So that was a blessing in itself.
Yeah, sounds great. Is it but I'm curious. So did that start as a fostering situation?
Yes.
So not with necessarily the expectation of adoption, or maybe that was sort of the possibility.
Correct. And some indications that the goal for every case is reunification, and we certainly would want that for every child. I would want my child to come back to me if I corrected what I needed to, and that doesn't happen in every case. I'll give you just a recent. We fostered a little girl. She was 3 months old when she came to us last April. And she was just reunified with her family like 3 weeks ago. So that's it's a good feeling that we helped that child move back into her house, and we'll always be there for her if she does decide to.
So you stay in so kids who you had a foster experience with, you stay in touch with,
Yeah,
or you're available.
and again, it depends on the comfort level of the natural parents,
Sure.
the biological parents. If they're comfortable enough for us to be a resource for them, which we, will continue to be, and occasionally some of the children that we've had in and out of our home, we've seen and gotten updates on, but sometimes you don't, and that's tough. But they always hold a place in your heart.
So we remarkably only have a couple of minutes left.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, it's foster care month. Easter Seals, I assume, is always looking for new foster families.
Absolutely.
I mean, what would you say to people who are sort of thinking, oh, I wonder if this is something I might do? I mean, what would you say to these folks? How would you talk to them about that?
I would say that you really need to sit down and talk to your family about it, and you really need to think about how your routines will change and how will your home change if you bring a stranger into your home. Well, it's a child, but it's a new dynamic for your home, and you have to make sure that everybody is on board with it. Because and we speak about mental health. Mental health is important for the entire family and that child. So you really have to sit down and talk to your family and think about it before you do it.
Yeah.
And the number again, we have the number if
Right,
someone wants to.
Yeah, Sandra Matevia, her number at Easter Seals is 355-5016, and that's showing up on the screen, if not as we speak.
Hopefully, any moment.
Yes, as we speak. I just got the thumbs up.
All right,
Director, so it's,
Good.
Thank you so much, Heath, for
Thank you.
joining us
Thank
in
you
the
for this
padded room.
opportunity.
It's
Yeah.
been great to
It's
talk.
been great having you here.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
good work on all this good stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So, wow, interesting, inspiring kind of stuff to think
Yeah,
about.
it is. It really is, and it's so complex. There's so many things that need to be thought about in this. It's not just a question of, well, this child needs to be not where they are and somewhere else safe. There's a lot obviously that goes into that.
Right, because you want to keep the doors open for them, and you want them to
Yeah.
have a safe, healthy place to be. Wow.
Right. Yeah.
But good, I'm so glad that people like Heath are doing this good
Absolutely.
work. in our
Yeah,
community.
yeah, it's great. It's great.
So, another pleasant time in the padded room.
That's right. Yep. And we're.
I would say in our little safe padded room, this is our little safe place. We get to go.
That's right. This is where they keep us to be safe, right here. We've got some other guests coming up. Our next show is, I'm not sure. Do
I'm
you
not
remember?
sure. Yeah, I don't know. We'll do it pretty soon.
A couple of weeks.
It's coming on.
But we'd like to do something with some mental health consumers.
Yes. I
Bring
hope.
some folks on
Excellent.
and talk about their experiences
Great.
with the mental health system
Yes, that'll be
and
fascinating.
their work on
Yeah.
wellness and recovery, et cetera.
Right.
So,
So stay tuned. Check our
Yeah.
website. You can send us an email from there. I would love to hear from you, and we'll see you again
yeah,
soon.
thanks for tuning in
Yes.
to the Padded
You
Room.
bet. Bye-bye.
See you.
This is great. It's really nice.
You've been watching The Padded Room, hosted by Damian Licata, Executive Director of the Granite State Monarchs Peer Support Agency, and Forrest Seymour, a psychotherapist with the Keene State College Counseling Center and in private practice. Tell us what you think about The Padded Room, see past shows online, and find our Cheshire TV schedule at thepaddedroom.net. And thanks for joining us in The Padded Room.